Hotep, and welcome once again to another edition of Community Cop. My name is Noel Leader, one of the co-founder members of 100 Blacks Law Enforcement Who Care. I'm here with my co-host today, Michael Greys, aka Big Mike.
Namaste.
And we'd like to welcome you, our viewing audience, to another edition of Community Cop. This is where truth and real talk occurs. We'd like to once again, as we always do, remind you that those of you who missed part of the program or want to share with your friends, you can tell them that they can catch a recorded version of this program on YouTube, on our Community Cop YouTube channel. We just only ask that you like, share, and subscribe to the channel of Community Cop. But as is customary, we want to go right to our historical piece. First up on the agenda is the Voters' Right Act on August 6, 1965. Michael, remind our viewing audience about the Voting Right Act.
Yes, even though we had won the right to vote, Black men, in 1870, the federal government understood and acknowledged the fact that Black people were being pushed out of the process all over the country. Consequently, by the Civil Rights Act, by the Voting Rights Act of 1965, assured that there will be federal intervention if states individually chose to suppress the Black vote in any way, that the federal government would intercede on the behalf of Blacks, because that's what the Voting Rights Act was. Now, it has since been gutted by the legislation put forth in Alabama, and I think it's Shelby versus Alabama, but certainly that was a noteworthy act won by the civil rights community, as well as certainly what was going on with the Black Power movement. But at that time, as you would see now, the civil rights organizations will always be credited with any advances we make in legal circles, and they will act as if the Black Power movement does not exist, even though the real threat and the danger is the Black Power movement, because it's not controlled like the civil rights movement was.
And Michael, although when you talk about the Voters' Rights Act that took a whole lot of work to get passed, these particular laws or the laws of this nation is only as good as your ability to enforce them. As you talked about it being gutted, the primary reason that there had to be a Voters' Rights Act, because America, in particular, racist white America, do not believe in democracy. Therefore, because under the tenets of democracy, all citizens should have a right to vote and everyone's vote should count. But in this country, there's always been an intent to suppress the Black vote, and it continues up in today. Although we do have that Voters' Right Act of 1965, today in 2001, we see all over the nation Black votes, attempting to once again be suppressed, even though that particular act was enacted, that particular law was enacted. So laws are good, but they're only as good as your ability to make certain that they're enforced, to the letter of the law and equally across the board.
You're absolutely correct.
Okay, another historical event you want us to remember is the death of Korryn Gaines, who was killed by Baltimore SWAT team on 8/1/2016. Remind our viewing audience about this particular police shooting.
Yes, Korryn Gaines was a beautiful young sister, 23 years old, who was standing on what she believed her constitutional rights. Now, initially, she was given a summons with respect to a traffic violation. So she was ticketed at that time, and she raised questions to that police officer in question around his right to give her a summons. And she quoted what will be considered maritime laws that govern the coast, the sea coast, and outside of American waters, what have you, miles from the coast. And so it wasn't appropriate, because a police officer, state troopers, what have you, they have the right, whether you like it or not, they have the right to give you a summons. Now, you can fight any summons in a court of law, but they do have the right to summons you. She raised questions about that. However, when she went to court, they would not give her the proper court dates. And they intentionally didn't give her the court dates so she would know what to appear in court. So because she did not appear in court, they converted her summons into a warrant, and emergency service police officers came to her door with regular police officers came to her door with a warrant for her arrest. Now, this obviously is unusual because they don't convert summons to warrants all that easily, no matter where you at in America. And in her particular case, they did, and SWAT surrounded her house, her apartment complex, and she was on FaceTime. She was in there with her son and her fiance, and he left the apartment building with her toddler, her infant son. And when they left, she was left in the apartment with her 5-year-old son, and she had on FaceTime to expose the entire incident. However, they deactivated it right before they shot her. Now, they viewed her, they showed her with a rifle with her 5-year-old son, and right before they executed her, and it was an execution by Baltimore SWAT, they deactivated her FaceTime and killed her. The situation was under control. No one was in danger. They had a control around the entire perimeter, front, back, sides of the house, everything. It was under control, and they did not have to kill her, in my opinion, but they did kill her, and her family later sued, was awarded the $38 million. It was overturned, and then 2 years later, in 2018, it was then overturned, and then in 2020, it was reinstituted. So the family was paid, but this was a young sister trying to comply with the laws of the land, and ultimately, for standing for her rights, she was callously killed.
Right. And when you talk about police strategy 101 as it relates to an armed, which some may consider an emotionally disturbed person, or even an armed suspect, as you stated, when there's no immediate threat, she had a child with her. The officers had no need to be that aggressive. You know, they had, all the time of the day, you have these not hostage negotiation squads that are professionals in terms of talking people down. The overly aggressive nature that the police utilize in dealing with our sister is unjustified. And as you said, it was an assassination, it was a murder.
Oh, and by the way, her son, a 5-year-old son, was telling her he would protect her, that he was with her. He didn't want to leave her. He wanted to stay and protect his mother. Just to show you what a skunk really is and truly how the devil works, EMS officer shot him. Didn't hurt him, but shot him, grazed his leg, and grazed his cheekbone, just showing off. They're well trained as police officers, and they have great marksmanship. And just to show you how callous they are, they wounded him without killing him, and they killed her.
Yeah, totally unnecessary. And few of us believe that if she would have been a white woman with a 5-year-old white child, would the officers have acted similarly. But that reminds me of another story that we want to update our viewing audience on, is the Breonna Taylor case. To date, the Biden administration, the Department of Justice, there's little information stating what their intentions are. I know they had earlier stated that they intend to investigate the cases of police brutality in Louisville, but we have no movement as it relates to her particular case. As those of you who watch Community Cop on a regular basis may remember, we brought up the issue of the search warrant. And if you remember, when the State Attorney General Daniel Cameron made this presentation to the public, he stated that his office was not going to look into the application of the search warrant that initiated this whole fiasco. And we thought it was very important. We thought this was his way of giving the police officers an out, because it has been determined that the postal inspector in Louisville named Tony Gooden had stated he never told these invading officers that his office had delivered drugs to that apartment. And that's what the officer had quoted and stated on his application to the judge, that they were told by the postal's local post office that they stated that they delivered drugs to this particular apartment, her sister Breonna Taylor's apartment, and that was the justification for the judge to give them a no-knock warrant. That very significant point should be investigated by not only the state, because they still can, but by Joe Biden's Department of Justice. We reminded our viewing audience that in Dallas right now, in January, 2 months before this Breonna Taylor case, in Houston, Texas, a Black police officer did similarly. He's accused of lying on his application to the judge for a search warrant in the drug-prone location. But the only difference is that these were two white individuals. Now, the police officers attempted to serve a no-knock warrant on the apartment. Individuals in the apartment returned fire to the police because they claimed they didn't know, or it was claimed that they didn't know the police officer was invading the apartment, and they were killed. When the dust settled, it was determined that the Black police officer, his name is Gerald Gaines, lied on his application to the judge, and they charged this Black police officer with murder, because two people ultimately died as a result of his perjuring himself on the application. So we asked the question, how come the same thing is not happening with our sister Breonna Taylor? Some of you expected different from the Joe Biden Department of Justice. Court is still out, but I just want to make sure that the family don't forget about sister Breonna Taylor, because one of the things they count on is for us to forget about these cases. Joe Biden's Department of Justice can still bring charge against these police officers. That's right. And it ought to be remembered that State Attorney General Danielle Cameron intentionally outed these officers, gave them an out by not discussing this. When he made his discussion, you can look at it still on YouTube. He said that there's certain things his office is not going to investigate it, and they're going to leave it up to the federal investigators to discuss. But he said in particular, civil rights issue was going to go to the federal government investigations. But the state investigations had all the power and authority to invest the officers lying on the application to the judge. Perjury is a state charge, but he intentionally didn't look into that because he knew the officers lied, and he knew that if the officers lied, that they would be held accountable. The postal inspector said that he told more than one officer that they didn't deliver drugs. So just to update the family on the Breonna Taylor case, some of us may continue to be looking at it to see if Joe Biden's Department of Justice do ever seriously look into that aspect of the case and charge these officers with murder, like the Black officer in Houston, Texas being charged.
Right.
All right.
I'm sure he was able to go home and kiss his white wife and sleep well at night.
Facts. All right, and we also want to ask some questions as to an updated story as it relates to the attack on the Capitol building. Michael, I know you take issue with the PBA to date, even though there's currently investigations into what happened. The PBA and which is the Police Benevolent Association here in New York, and the Fraternal Order of Police, which is a union of police officers throughout the country, have remained silent as it relates to this, to what occurred, even though hundreds of police officers were injured, some seriously, and there has been police deaths as well. Michael, you raised a question about their silence.
Yeah, I'm very concerned because the PBA as well as the FOP, they go all out, in protecting their members, especially, their white members. They go all out when it comes to that, and they will give no quarter when a police officer, even if it's a dirty shooting and the police officers kill somebody, they're gonna mount a defense. But if you put your hands or shoot at a police officer in any way, they're coming with guns blazing. So you just have to look at the PVA and the silence of the FOP, that they can actually sit by idly quiet while police officers not only were killed and some committed suicide later, but a police officer who had a severed spinal cord, one loss of eye, a whole litany of injuries all over the place. The beatdowns were just uncanny when you look at the way police officers was beaten. And then if you look at even the Republican Party, we're talking about the highest officials in the land, US senators and people in the House of Representatives, actually saying that this was nothing but a tour that day. It was nothing, it was not an insurrection. It was not terrorism. It was nothing but a friendly tour that might not have been totally under control, but there was no danger. Some senators said they didn't feel any danger there. And then you got Fox News, which is the Bible to so many white police officers. They often quote and live by what Fox News says. Fox News called those police officers that testified in front of Congress crisis actors. They actually went all out, called them names, said they were actors, said they were lying, said they were making up things. You don't make up a death. A police officer was killed that day. His head was bashed in by a fire extinguisher. No one has been charged. Where's the FOP? Where's the PBA? No one has even been charged with killing a police officer yet. The US senators should all be, they all act like they're pro-military and pro-police, but they're strangely silent on this now. So I'm just pointing out that when Fox News hears police officers testifying and crying, all the passion, all the emotions are coming out. They are normally, police officers are normally held as patriots. They're not being held as patriots. Fox News, host after host, called them actors. One specifically called them crisis actors. So it only shows you how flippant, how how unrealistic you can make a real situation. And if you want to, you can fix your mind. It shows you just how sick white supremacy is when you can turn on the very people who you always held and put on a pedestal and call them actors when they're actually giving you physical accounts of what happened to them. When a Latino police officer, now even besides the white ones, a Latino officer was saying how he had so much bear spray in his face and over his body that he couldn't take a shower that night and that he couldn't sleep because when he did put water on him to try to wash it off, his body was burning. So they dismissed him. They dismissed white officers that had military experience, that saw action. Desert Storm and all of that. So they're turning around and getting on them. You can't have it both ways. They're heroes and patriots one day, and now they're crisis actors now.
And you point out a very important point, Michael, that these individuals, not only the, when you talk about the PBA or the FOP, not only the leaders of those groups, but the membership is also silent. The membership is not even outraged, impressing the executive board members of these organizations to be a little more vocal, a little more active. And not only that, but if you look at a lot of the police chats, they're echoing some of the same sentiments as some of these senators in terms of castigating and blasting and criticizing these police officers that are testifying under oath about what they experienced on that particular day. But this just goes to show what we talk about many times in this program is that whether it be senators, or congressmen, police officers, they don't believe in anything except for power. They will support and believe in police officers if they speak according to their political agenda. They believe in democracy, they believe in capitalism, as long as these things support them and their political will. So they're not, they don't have no genuine concern for these institutions or these principles. Their only concern is power, and anything and everything that speaks or challenges their power, they reject outright. as you stated, that, you know, Republicans who are so-called conservative have always been considered to be pro-police. And when you have these police officers testifying and emotionally about what they experience, and to hear these senators who ordinarily are considered pro-police being so critical of these individuals show the utter hypocrisy, you know, of what they really about. You know, they're angry because they support Donald Trump. They support many of those individuals, insurrectionists who stormed the Capitol building. And because of that, they don't see these guys as police officers. They see them as against their political agenda. They see them as the enemy. So these people have no generic, no sincere support of any principle, any institution, any person, any philosophy, any religion that challenges their power. And it's utter hypocrisy.
And an example, quick example of what you just said, challenging power. A crowd of terrorists tried to get by some police officers.
Yes.
One police officer jumped in their way and he said, "You're supposed to be with us." This is what the terrorist said to the police officer. "You're supposed to be with us." He said, "My job is to protect the Capitol and the individuals in here." And he said, "But you, my brother, you supposed to be with me." He said, "No, my job is to protect the elected officials in this building." And then that person went on to say, "Then you an enemy of the people, you know, you a communist, you ain't no good and you're on the wrong side." And then the black cop that tried to stop them, they called him a nigger outright. Told him to his face. He said he's never been called a nigger in uniform until January 6th. He said it's always been him in civilian attire. He said that was the first time in his life that he was called a nigger by a group of people while he was in uniform.
All right. All right. We'll continue to update our family as these investigations wind down and see where they ultimately, you know, how they ultimately are resolved. All right, Michael, you wanted to talk about a story that happened. There's a sister named Nicole Denise Jackson, who's from Alabama. She met someone, a white German, over the internet and traveled to Germany. Her family is kind of concerned because they haven't heard from her in a few weeks. Why don't you inform our viewing audience about that story?
Yes, just want to briefly say that what she did was she met a white guy online in 2018 and somehow agreed to go to Germany with him. Now she's from Alabama, Birmingham, who they used to call that Birmingham. How little she learned from history of what the white man really is. Here she casually goes to Germany with a white man she met online. Would she have gone to Africa with an African, casually meeting him and then going to Africa with him? I think there would have been some trepidation. I think there would have been trepidation if she met a brother from Brooklyn and just outright leave Birmingham, Alabama, and ends up in Harlem or Brooklyn with a black man. But she freely goes to Germany. When she arrived there, she spoke to her family. She spoke to friends. That was 2 years ago. No one has heard from her in 2 years. Now the family is concerned. The family should have been concerned before already. They should have asked her, is she sure is that this is a safe move, that this is what she wants to do, go to Germany. Germany has a history of being anti-Black. And so you don't know what kind of sacrifice or torture she could have gone through there, and now she is no more, perhaps. But in any event, the family's gonna go there. They've alerted the German law enforcement and sent pictures. They have not gotten any concrete evidence to go further. And I'm sure that it's not a priority to the German police officers.
And Michael, that story is reminiscent of a few stories that happened right here in the States. One in particular was Sister Tamala Horsford of Cummings, Georgia. she had went over a sleepover. She was an adult female. She had went over a friend's house, a group of white women. I think it was about 8 or 9 of them, for a sleepover, a girls' night out. And she wound up dead the following morning, face down in the backyard. And when the police officers, of course, her white friends, quote unquote, were a little slow in calling the police, a little slow in calling 911. When they did call 911, the 911 operator asked her, was there, did she have a pulse? Was she breathing? And her white so-called friends, they didn't even know if she had a pulse, if she was bleeding. So the 911 operator said, well, can somebody go down there and check? What person would see someone they considered to be a friend unconscious, possibly dead, in their backyard, and not at least go up to her to see if she's all right, if she's still alive, if she needs CPR, et cetera, et cetera. So, Professor Clark always told us that we have to understand that there's a distinction between someone being friendly and someone being your friend. It was his position that we have no friends. African Americans have no friends. So,
right.
We ought to be doubly careful of those individuals that we consider to be friendly or our friends, which historically we've seen there's a whole lot of problems. And Mike, I believe you even informed me today that in the Tamala Horsford case, that the prosecutor had determined not to press any charges against anyone.
Delay, and then ultimately deny.
Facts.
That's always been the strategy. As we mentioned last week about, they look at us as very emotional and less analytical. Consequently, they delayed it. Now they deny you justice because the prosecutors just said there will be no charges in this case.
All right, Michael, there's a case regarding an Army Ranger, a white Army Ranger in Tacoma, Washington, who's now being accused of killing his sister, Denise Smith. I think his name is Philip Burns.
Yeah.
Don't you?
Okay. What he did was he tried to get into a building. She was a newly hired security guard, 41 years old, beautiful sister, denied him entrance into the building. He ultimately pushed his way, and when she tried to stop him, he assaulted her. He beat her brains, and he was doing this. Now, he's an Army Ranger. Did I mention that?
Right. Go ahead.
He's
I think I did.
An Army Ranger, current, not past. He's currently stationed in the Joint Base Lewis McCord base in Tacoma, Washington. Now, he went into a rage because his white supremacy kicked in, that a Black woman has a nerve to tell him he can't come into a building, which he's assigned to secure. Consequently, he beat the stuffing out of her, beat her bad, choked her out, strangled her to death, dragged her out of the lobby area by her braids. This is all on video surveillance, a video surveillance camera. Beat her bad, dragged her out, choked her out, dragged her by her braids, and then had the temerity to call 911 and claim that he was sexually assaulted. Now, you kill her, you outright, you're an Army Ranger, you well-trained in an elite unit, 26 years old, you beat a 41-year-old woman down, strangle her, and she's a bloody mess. You drag her by her braids and just callous from beginning to end. And then you call 911 and say you've been sexually assaulted. The police got there, saw her laying in a pool of blood, unresponsive. Detectives said she was beaten severely and killed. That's what they said. This is not 100 Blacks in law enforcement talking. This is what Tacoma Police Department said. She was beaten severely, and yet he had the nerve to call and say he was sexually assaulted and that he had been drinking. This is, I mean, how sick can you be? He jumped from that floor and jumped down. He took some chairs and broke some windows. He started breaking things. It's all on film, all around him. Claims he was sexually assaulted, and now he's pleading not guilty when he was charged. It's a $2 million bond on him now. He has a $2 million bond. So I'm sure that the Army is not going to pay that to get him out. He shouldn't have a leg to stand on, and they should really go after him. And let me just tell you his charges real quickly, Noel.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask you that too.
His charges are 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of first-degree kidnapping, and 1 count of first-degree burglary. Those are his charges.
Okay, serious charges.
Yes, serious charges.
Okay, now what the family has to be very careful is that, it's one thing for the prosecutor to charge a white defendant with these serious charges, but we definitely have to make certain that he gets prosecuted and sentenced to the fullest extent of the law, that there's no plea bargain in this case. I think we talked, if not last week, I think it was last week, about a police officer who was convicted of murder. And I think he was allowed to plead. He was charged with murder. Yeah. He was allowed to plead to manslaughter.
8 months.
And given only 3 years. So we have to pay the family.
Right.
The family has to pay very close attention, not only when these individuals are arrested, because as you stated, Michael, delay. We have to make sure that this individual is not only prosecuted, but convicted and sentenced, to the fullest extent of the law, because that is, a very unfortunate, sad case.
I mean, how arrogant can you be to you see her in uniform telling you you cannot enter a building, and he just savagely
murdered her.
Just beat the, oh man.
Right.
It's unconscionable to even imagine you're being denied entrance, and that translates into you killing a woman for that.
Right.
And then you claim you were sexually assaulted. I mean, how sick are you to do something like that?
Right. Well, we'll keep our family abreast, as this case goes through the criminal justice process on how this ultimately winds up. Talking about sexual assault, today, which is Tuesday, New York State Attorney General Letitia James announced that her office, who was investigating our governor, Governor Cuomo, was guilty of sexually harassing multiple women. And of course, we talked about on Community Cop months ago how we've seen this particular investigation and these allegations as a chicken come home to roost for Governor Cuomo. This is the same individual who we believe conspired with a whole lot of public officials in New York State against then Governor David Paterson to get him not to run, while making so many salacious accusations against him, which really didn't come up to what he's being charged of. So we believe that he was one of the co-conspirators who wanted David Paterson not to run again for governor so that he can be governor. So now he's tasting some of what David Paterson has experienced. And he, in defense of himself, he gave an explanation of some of the allegations that were made against him. But what he ceases to understand is that in 2021, some of the things that he claimed he did out of good faith, he just can't do, such as having a conversation with a victim of sexual abuse who's a subordinate of his. Many deemed that to be highly inappropriate. She thought some of the questions that he asked her were inappropriate, but he, in his arrogance, I guess as a mayor, as a governor, attempted to justify doing that, as well as many other things he did with the kissing and the hugs. Maybe back in the days that was acceptable, but he has to understand, and clearly he doesn't at this point, that is unacceptable practice and pattern in 2021. Many women do not appreciate such gestures, and even if he intended it to be non-sexual, that's the way they interpret it. So, we, as I stated, and I think you can see one of our old programs called The Chicken Coming Home to Roost.
That's right.
But we'll see. The fate is some people saying that he should step down from his governorship, and his arrogance, of course. To date, he has not stated he will, and we'll keep our family abreast of that particular case. Did you want to say anything to your good governor, who called you, by the way, who's one of his staff members called you, Michael, to try to get you not to support Governor David Paterson when his co-conspirators were gathered around David Paterson to get him not to run for governor?
So true. Actually, two of his staff members, they were calling me while I was driving up to Harlem to defend Governor Paterson, and they also called you while you were driving up separately to go up there to defend Governor Paterson. Now, it is chickens coming home to roost in the sense that he used salacious stories that were not true about David Paterson to discourage him from running for another term and actually trying to get him to step down.
Right.
And also, him as well as his father gave air cover to those who raped and kidnapped Tawana Brawley. Mm-hmm. We can't forget that. So when you look at it, he was involved in a cover-up of Tawana Brawley. She was raped and kidnapped over a 3-day period. And now he used stories that weren't true about David Paterson to ultimately get that position as governor. And now the evidence is overwhelming. Now I'll be the first one to admit, and I like the way you presented it, Noel, with respect to he didn't it's not like physically he tried to do anything to impose his will. I mean, when you look at some of the cases that they have put against him, it's really lightweight stuff, that he held a hand too long, or a hand might have inappropriately touched her waist, or his words were too intrusive. And the last case that Attorney General Tish James pointed out is that there was a young lady, very young, that was on his personal detail, and you have to have 3 years of service as a state trooper before you can be a part of the governor's personal detail that secures his safety. And she didn't have the 3 years. She had less than 3 years, yet she was given that position, I guess because he found favor with her. So it was things like that. So at a different time, it would be non-consequential. It would just be literally immaterial. But as you pointed out, in these days and times, you have to understand that those things have to be discouraged. It's not just simple when a woman says no is no. It's certain things that there's protocols with respect to when you have such a powerful office, you cannot do, you cannot say, and he did some of those things, obviously by Tish James' investigation.
Okay, well, we will see what the governor's fate is, I guess in the coming weeks, whether or not there will be surmountable pressure for him to step down, or whether or not he will maintain his office throughout the year and run for re-election. I know he always had a will to run for 4 terms as governor, but time will tell. All right, we also want to talk about President Biden. Those of you who have your ear to the ground knows that President Joe Biden is intending to sign an infrastructure bill where trillions and trillions of dollars will be spent on rebuilding things, allegedly to rebuild bridges and streets and tunnels and sewer systems, et cetera, infrastructure. It's a very, very expensive bill. And, I was having a discussion with Julian Harper this week regarding these government contracts. Many of us don't understand, and Charles Barron always talked about, in America, the racism is in the budget, be it the federal budget, be it state gov budgets or city budgets. Many of these individuals become rich with these government contracts. But according to President Biden, he's throwing out a red herring, claiming that part of the benefit of passing this infrastructure bill will go to favor Black people. Now, Joe Biden, to date, in my humble opinion, has done very little, if not nothing, to assist African Americans. But once again, here he is throwing out that this bill will help Black people. Michael.
Well, from the outset, Julian Harper is a good person to talk to because not only is he an expert on legal affairs, but he understands the politics of contracts, and he knows how to look in the fine print to read in between the lines to see what impact a certain bill has. Julian is always a good person to look at things like that. Now, Biden, by the way, he did suggest the governor Cuomo today that he should step down because, these same remarks were plaguing him during his campaign, the Biden campaign. So he is first in line to say that Cuomo should step down, which makes his image a little better. Now, with respect to the infrastructure bill, he is saying his senior advisor to the president, and he's also director of the White House Office of Public Engagement. That's a fancy title, saying that he speaks to Black people. So he is telling Black people that this bill prioritizes the Black community because everything from 10 million lead pipes will be removed, which will definitely affect Black people. It's being done with a racial equity lens. That's what he's claiming this bill, as if 17 Republicans would vote for a bill that's prioritizing Black people, not on this earth. And so he goes on to say that everything from 10 million lead pipes that delivers water to people's homes, 400,000 lead pipes that are directed towards schools of Blacks and Latinos. So they're admitting that they know the pipes that go to schools that will ill affect Black children and Latino children. So if they know that, why didn't they do something about that before? So he's claiming that this infrastructure bill will emphasize that we deserve clean water in school and clean water in our homes. Now, you, Noel, who you and Julian, who always discuss contracts and things like that, you know full well that when you see the digging in the ground to remove lead pipes, is going to be white companies that are going to be doing that. He's going to put white people to work. You're not going to see Black people digging into the ground. If you'll be lucky to catch a Black person with a flag in his hand, a stop sign flag or something like that. The majority of those jobs are going to go to white men, putting them back to work all over this country. The bridges, tunnels, the lead pipe removals that will be done all over America will be done by white men, and you and I know that.
And any Black person, this is how pathetic Black politicians are across the board, because they don't make it mandatory. I know we talk a lot about Adam Clayton Powell, who made it his position that he didn't sign a lot of bills unless members of the Black community benefited. It was mandatory. He didn't even want to see a bill. He'll push it back and tell them to rewrite it or redraw it. Today, Black politicians are always on board on these hefty bills or grants or loans, et cetera, to white corporate America, and they never have any side note saying that their constituents or their communities benefit. White men nationally, statewide, and locally benefit greatly by these government contracts to the tune of trillions and millions and billions of dollars. You know, and we don't have to get all sophisticated in terms of wondering whether or not blacks are not only going to get some contracts, because we not only want jobs, but there's black companies around this nation that should get some of this infrastructure money. But if I was a black politician, I would make certain that that language is imputed into the agreement, or else I would organize black members of the Black Congressional Caucus to vote against it. They have to make certain that because this is taxpayers' money. This money is not coming out of anywhere. This is money that we pay taxes to. But many white lobbyists work in conjunction with these white politicians to support bills such as this, and they're licking their chops because these trillions and billions of dollars that are going to be spent for infrastructure, that money's going into their pockets, into their companies, into their corporations, and African Americans get very little, if any, of that money. And as I was implying earlier, all you have to do is, as you drive to New York City, you see these construction sites, whether it be the Brooklyn Queens Expressway, whether it be a building, look at downtown Brooklyn, count how many black men or black women are working on these construction sites. These are millions and hundreds of millions of dollars in construction projects that are going on in our community. And our politicians, some of who you support and some of who you love, some who've made you so many promises about what they're going to do, but just look at the construction that's going on in our community and how many jobs we don't have. Look at our communities being gentrified. All of our communities are led by black politicians, some who you love and support and who sound so good and you have so much high aspirations for. What are they doing as it relates to those issues? But these black politicians, before they sign off for such a large spending bill, this infrastructure bill, they ought to mandate, but they won't, that African-American companies, black African-American professionals get a percentage of these mandated to get a percentage of these contracts and some of these jobs, and be allowed to enter into some of these unions, because many of these union jobs get a lot of money. In our community, you can look, in the black community, if they have any minorities and Latinos, look at some of these construction projects in Bed-Stuy, right in your community around the city. If they have any so-called members of the black or brown community, they're Latinos, not African Americans. Many of the Latinos look like they're new immigrants. Very few black men and women, and our pathetic black politicians. Many of this occurs in their district, be it congressional districts, local state district, council districts, borough president districts. And all of this is going on under their tenure. This large, very vast infrastructure bill that the Biden administration is talking about spending, we know where that money's going into, and it's not going into the black community. And this is something that should be mandated before any black person in Congress or the few black senators that there are, before they vote and support this bill.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to disagree with you. And when you said Biden has done nothing, he gave us Juneteenth as a holiday. Everything else is what Julian would call a smoke and mirror. So he gave us Juneteenth. Now, the fact that he's saying that he's going to give us clean water, well, we're supposed to get clean water. So we should be drinking clean water. So I don't consider that going above and beyond the call of duty. And just remember, Governor Patterson tried to give less than 1% of the action out there at the raceway in Long Island. What happened? Governor Patterson, he tried that. Everybody ran out of their office and attacked him. Major newspapers all attacked him. Government officials all attacked him and said, how dare you try to give Floyd Flake and others less than 1% of the action. They want it all. So they will discourage you from trying to do anything for your people, because even if you try to do something minuscule, like less than 1%, and they come after you for that, well, David Dinkins claimed at one time he was going to do 20% of the city's contracts going to so-called minorities, which meant white women, Asians, Latinos, Blacks, everything under the sun. And when all is said and done, Blacks got less than 2% out of that so-called 20%. So we're going to always find ourselves on the short end because we are not putting the right people in office. And if you want to know what a Black person is going to do in office, just see what they've done in office all them years, and then you know what they're going to do. There's nothing that will predict future behavior like past behavior. So as we speak right now, Bed-Stuy is being gentrified. East New York is being gentrified. Flatbush being gentrified. So we don't have to wonder what's going to happen in Brooklyn because it's happening right now. So a word to the wise is sufficient. All these Black elected officials in the past and present that's telling you one thing, don't look at the left hand, look at both hands, see what the left and right hand is doing, and then you'll be better informed and know better what's going to happen, because right now, Biden is claiming that this is for Black people, and you know good and well, white people will get those contracts to dig into the ground, build bridges, tunnels, what have you, and they're going to be the ones that's going to replace all these lead pipes all over. They're going to do that, and Black people, if you're lucky, you might have a stop sign in your hand directing traffic at a construction site.
And not even ever getting the opportunity to learn a trade, to be introduced to join a union. I remember many times I passed some of these sites, and some of these Irish people, they have the heavy Irish accent. I know that their introduction to American life is relatively new. I'm like, how do they get into these unions before individuals who've been in this country for the last 400 plus years? I mean, I think it's just a smack in the face for so many in our community to support enthusiastically many of these Black politicians. When we see what's going on in our community, and you didn't even mention Bushwick. I know there's a whole lot of communities you could have mentioned that are being gentrified throughout the borough of Brooklyn. And don't forget, gentrification is just a nice way to say in moderately income African Americans and some Latinos are being forced out of neighborhoods that they used to live in. You know, Bed-Stuy, if it was 95% Black at one time, and if you turn around and it's 70% Black, where they going? You know, go to any homeless shelter. You know, I see very few whites in any homeless shelter. You know, so African Americans are being displaced out of Brooklyn, New York, you know, as we speak. And as it relates to these jobs, you know, go downtown Brooklyn, stand there one day when these guys on their lunch break, see how many Black men and women you see. Not like Michael said, not the flag wavers, who are learning skills, who are plumbers, who are electricians, who are working the big trucks. You know, see how many are working. And if I was a Black politician, I would make demands that these work sites, you know, if you want a contract, if you want these government contracts, if you want these tax breaks, if I'm going to vote for this bill, that it is stated in, because you can't trust them to do it on their own because they haven't done it and they're not going to do it, that members of our community are getting some of this government money. You know, and for the life of me, you know, our community, with all of that's going on, we continue to support individuals who don't have a Black agenda, who've never produced a Black capital, you know, who never produced Black business. You know, their districts, you know, are in increase in terms of Black companies, and there's so much money going around. But as it relates to this infrastructure bill, I would hope that, you know, before these individuals supported it, that they would add that in there, that a certain percentages of these contracts have to go not to, this
so-called minorities,
have to go to Blacks, you know, have to go to the members of the African American community, of African American contractors, you know. So, you know, we'll see. Anything else on that subject, Mike?
Yeah. Again, I just want to repeat something, because you have so many insightful points, but you just make them brief, Noel. Mm-hmm. I just want to repeat something you said. A lot of these guys that are millionaires and billionaires, they got it through government contracts.
Facts.
They didn't do it. They didn't make it the old-fashioned work, grind and build up their businesses. They had the inside track. They used lobbyists or what have you. They went to the dinners. They greased people's palms with money and ultimately got those contracts, and they get a piece of the action from every New York City mayor. They tear streets up. They tear up Flatbush Avenue. They tear up Atlantic Avenue every few years, and all these other streets that doesn't even need it. They tear them up, and they keep on getting millions and millions of dollars of contracts. Dinkins didn't give them the blacks. I haven't seen one mayor yet. I want to see what happens in this new administration that's forthcoming. But right now, I have an indication of what's going to happen because I see what's happening right now in the borough of Brooklyn. So I have an idea as to what's going to happen in the future.
All right. Our last story, we want to talk about the Deputy Attorney in General. Those of you, many of us know and have watched the Olympics that are going on right now in Tokyo. We also know about our good sister, Simone Biles, who, for a variety of reasons, had to step down. She was supposed to be the leading gymnast, not only in America, but throughout the whole world. Very competitive, very talented sister. But she felt that emotionally she couldn't compete and decided and announced that she would be stepping down. Michael, you informed us that the Deputy Attorney General in Texas had the gall to criticize her publicly for making this particular decision. Talk about him and her, Mike.
Yes, let me just say briefly in our last 3.5 minutes, I'll just say that Deputy Attorney General in Texas, Aaron Reeds, he called her a selfish, childish, national embarrassment. Now, he doesn't know what it is to go up 10 feet in the air and twist and turn your body where you can break your neck and die right on the spot. He has no idea all the hours, all the years that it takes to become the greatest gymnast of all time. Not the best right now, the greatest gymnast ever. They have certain routines that she do. They're naming them after her because no one else has ever done them or even attempted to do them. And he calls her a national embarrassment. This is nothing but a white supremacist just talking out of the left side of his mouth because he believes it'll help get him votes in Texas, and that all those on Fox News that have been attacking her is because they know that that's what you characterized last week as the good white folks response. They love it and they don't have a problem with it. That's why they gravitate towards those type of statements.
All right, closing remarks.
Again, black man, black woman, protect the black child, accept your own and be yourself. And we lost a great giant yesterday, Dr. Runoko Rashidi, one of the greatest historians we've ever produced, fact-finding extraordinaire. He's made his transition in Kemet. He just touched down 2 days ago, and yesterday he lost his life. Long live the spirit of Dr. Runoko Rashidi, one of the great cubs in a long line from the Hubert Harrisons and the Marcus Garveys, all the way to the Dr. Benz and Dr. Clarks. Well, he was under them, and unfortunately, he just lost his life. One of the tallest trees in the African forest has fallen, but there will be those who will continue his work, and the Dr. Jeffries of the world, who I spoke to today, will continue that work. So God bless that spirit, and long live the spirit of Dr. Runoko Rashidi.
Okay, thank you for that, Mike. And on behalf of Community Cop, we'd like to thank our engineers and producers, Nat Woods, Veronica Kitt, Sheila Berry. We'd like to thank you, our viewing audience, once again for watching. See you next Tuesday. Knowledge is power. Big ups to Attorney at War Automatics. We love you.
Who you spoke to the other day.
Kitty Cat, yes, I was fortunate enough to speak to him the other day. Thanks to you, Mike. And also, we want to remind our family real quick, because we have to close down about the lecture series on Wednesday.
Yeah. This
Real
is
quick.
we on pause right now. They're going through renovations, but we will soon be back in action. But in the meantime, we will keep you abreast as to when our next lecture is. But we're going to be going to Washington real soon with the irritated genie, and we're going to have a good time there. But we will be back real soon, and we'll let you know.
Okay. Peace, family.